simply put, and I like things simple.
Yep.
I'm old.
To me, I have learned if you try to, when I'm studying the Bible, if I try to do that and stay simple and stay out of my head, it's a lot easier. It makes a lot more sense because I put all my thoughts into it and I usually get confused. Usually if you stay simple with what the text says, it makes it a lot easier. And that's kind of the way this lesson is. But we're on lesson 6 from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18. Got a little commentary in here. It said, according to the Pew Research Center, about 73% of all U.S. adults believe in heaven, and 62% believe in hell. It says, surprisingly, 4% of people who call themselves evangelicals don't believe in heaven, and 9% don't believe in hell. There is then a lot of confusion concerning the afterlife. And that's for us now. There's confusion. We know, I say confusion, there's a lot of different people that has different beliefs, and they interpret the Bible different, I guess you would say, of end time prophecy. And there's, I mean, we do have a lot of confusion in our time. But this at Thessalonians' time, they were everything was new. The gospel was brand new to them. They didn't have as much to look on as, well, I say that. They had the Old Testament prophets they could have looked back on, but they were still, I think they were still, as we talked about, Paul had come and seen them with his group, and they were, and that's kind of where they had got to, I think. I don't think they had done a lot of studying in the Old Testament or in the Pentateuch or with the prophets or anything like that. I don't think they had studied a lot of that, but they were concerned about the end times. You know, last week we talked about that, about the Thessalonians. Some of them had just quit their jobs and started waiting on Jesus to come back, and that's where they were. And that is faith in Christ, but it's kind of misplaced. It's going a little too far, and Paul corrected them with that last week. Told them to do all the things that he had taught them. Take care of your fellow man, and wait on Christ, and do it expecting Christ. And so this is we're going to talk about this time is they had gotten also to a point they believed in Christ, but they were afraid that their loved ones who may die before Christ's return, what's going to happen to them? You know, even if they have accepted Christ, what's going to happen to them? Where are they going to go? What's going to be the case? Or they, even to the point of they believe that maybe they wouldn't get as much of a reward as those that were still alive. You know, they had questions. They were seriously concerned. They apparently had never come up. And you ever talk to someone? I know I do it all the time at work. I'll have a meeting with someone or something, and you tell them a lot of stuff, and then you get done, and you think, oh no, I forgot to tell them this one thing. It's going to make this other thing make sense, you know. And you have to shoot them an email or call them back or something like that. And I don't know. Paul may have covered it and they missed it, or he may have never covered it, you know. But they had a concern. They were concerned what's going to happen with their loved ones. After they died before Christ comes. And it says that Paul taught them, as we're going to get into this, Paul taught them the truth. Paul taught them exactly how everything's going to go. So we'll start in verse 13 of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. It says, but I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. So as I'd said, it's talking about their dead relatives, and they was unsure of what would happen. They were concerned they'd have a inferior inferior, what does it say, afterlife there in the text there. It says they was worried that they would have an inferior afterlife, was worried about everything. The grieving, and it talks about that a little bit here too, the worried about them in a sense, and grieving in another sense when they passed away, because they didn't have that sure hope that we do of being reunited or seeing those fellow believers again. And they didn't know that sure hope in their head. They hadn't been taught it, or hadn't studied, or hadn't learned, but they didn't have that sure hope in their head that they would see them again. So that's what Paul's here doing. And it says there in the bottom of verse 13 there, even as others which have no hope. And it says here in the text that their Greek neighbors was some of the ones that had no hope. And when they would have someone passed away, and we know it's talked about in other places in the New Testament where they hired mourners even. They would get people to come out and mourn, and they would make huge processions over when someone passed away. But they had no hope. They thought that was it. And that's they thought when they're gone, and that's it forever. And that's what it says their Greek neighbors, and said that's what Paul was trying to tell them, is to don't be like those around you that have no hope. And that will be a witness as well for you during your time of grief, or whatever it is, your confidence and your security, knowing that you're going to see that person again. So that's the difference that Paul wanted them to see and wanted them to show to others whenever they did lose someone, to not be just completely tore apart. And that would be a huge difference if you would think about it, because everyone, you know how funerals are in this area. If it's someone that's fairly well known, there'll be hundreds and hundreds of people there, and there's you see different kinds of grief with different people, and this lesson kind of talks about that as well, the different kinds of grief and different kinds of mourning, and how different people do that. So,
In New Orleans, they march down the street, or I don't know if they do it as much as that, but one of the tour guides back 30 years ago was saying, when a prominent person died, they hired extra people, and they do music in their funeral march.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big to-do down there. Of course,
It's a
I guess
celebration.
the
It's
what?
like a celebration instead of.
Yeah, well, and I don't know, they're just different down. New Orleans is different now. It's a good place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah. I don't know, I can't believe it took all my life to realize it. I guess geography wasn't a strong suit, but the United States is so big, and I'd never thought about it until I heard someone from Europe or something like that talk about it. The United States is so big, and we have so much diversity in the United States because we're so big. If you overlaid us over Europe and that whole area there, we're in all kind of countries, and we know how over there all the different countries have so many different things going on, and we're that big too. We're just all connected a lot more, and we don't have countries dividing our lines. We're just states. So we know there's a large diversity just in the United States of how people act and carry on and everything else. So. We're going now to verse 14. It says, "For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with them." So it says, if we only have hope in this life and not in afterlife, we are miserable and our faith is vain, as that's what Paul wrote in Corinthians. It says, because of Christ's resurrection, believers have victory over death and the grave. And that's what Paul was trying to teach them here, is this is what we call the rapture, what we're getting to, is what Paul's trying to trying to talk to them about, trying to tell them how things will be, and that those who have passed away will in no means be left out. And there is nothing lacking in anything that anything concerning those who have passed away before those who are still here when Christ returns. There'll be zero lacking. Everything. They're actually what it says. We'll get into in the next in verse 15, but there will be nothing lacking. And it says, I like what he talks about here too in the text on down there. It said Paul used sleep to refer to the believer's state after death. He didn't mean that believers go into a soul sleep after death. He meant that death-like sleep is a temporary state. And it says to be absent from our physical earthly bodies is to be present with the Lord in a conscious state. So I would say that would be to be absent with our body in a physical form would be to be present with the Lord in conscious state. Would that be spiritual body?
In a spiritual
You'd be
state.
present with the Lord in your spiritual body, or instead of and the temporal state, that temporary state there is, and if you compare it to sleep, and this is a question I don't know how much clear, but you compare it to sleep. Like we go to sleep at night, and if you're fortunate enough to sleep through the night, bless your heart. You go to sleep at night, and you wake up the next morning, and it just doesn't feel like any time passed if you sleep well, and that's all I can say this compares to is when you pass away, it doesn't feel like you don't feel like a big void of time. I don't think you get the feeling of the time travel and all that other stuff of what you would think it would be. You say much about that?
He's basically using sleep as those that have died.
Right.
And to be absent from this body is to be present with the Lord. The moment that they die here, their spirit leaves and their body stays.
Right.
And you notice that he says right at the end, the Lord will bring with him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's bringing that spiritual person back with him from heaven. So that verse also says, and so shall we ever be with the Lord.
Right.
So once we die, we're forever in his presence.
Right.
Either spiritually and physically.
Yeah.
So the moment that we pass away, and we'll use what he's talking here, the moment we pass away, our spirit goes to be with the Lord, and it's never going to leave his presence. So when he comes back to call the saints home at the rapture, he brings all of those that have died first with him, the spiritual aspect of them.
Right.
And then you'll notice the next verse, and the dead in Christ shall rise first.
Right.
So the dead in Christ shall rise first. That's not their spirit, because their spirit's already with him and he's bringing them back.
Right.
But the dead in Christ shall rise first is the physical part of that individual that was left here.
Yeah.
And then that physical part will go and be joined together with its spiritual part. And that's when it becomes that perfect body. That mortal puts on immortality, and that corruption puts on incorruption.
Mm-hmm.
For that moment there, it's joined together with its spirit. And at the rapture, immediately after this, they go to heaven and they stand before Jesus at the judgment seat to be judged for the things done in this body, whether good or bad, during the tribulation time.
Yeah. So your glorified body, and it talks about the dead in Christ rise first. The picture in everybody's head of graveyards having holes all in them is not correct. It's just going to be more of a new dirt body. Is that right? We're not talking about holes coming out of the ground everywhere where all the caskets, because there's people that's cremated, there's people that's in the oceans, there's people in rivers and things like that all over the world. And that's what I was wondering, are we going to get that new dirt body, or are we going to, or is the old one coming out of the ground, or being gathered up and renewed? Because it's all dirt anyway. It's by the time, if somebody's been dead for 1,000 years, they're dust anyway, so.
I ain't never really thought about it like that. I just know that what made me me while I'm here
Yeah.
is going to be made perfect.
Right.
sinless perfection when I join my spirit,
Right,
if the Lord don't come back sooner.
right.
So those that are alive and remain shall be caught up together. And so at that moment, this physical body, that if the Lord come back right now, what makes us up right now is going to be with Him.
Right.
Which kind of leads me to believe that what made them up that have been dead is going to be put back together.
Yeah,
Well, when Jesus rose from the dead, he had the scars and marks.
and it also says that there were people that had passed away that came when Jesus was resurrected. There was people that was already dead that popped up too, you know.
That was Old Testament saints.
Yes.
Yeah. Because he went down and set them free.
Yeah,
Paradise was the place to go for all those that trusted in Christ up to Jesus' resurrection.
Mhm.
The moment, up to his crucifixion, and those 3 days that he was in the grave. Those 3 days that he was in the grave, he went to paradise and set all of those that were in paradise free.
Mhm.
So you remember Lazarus was in Abraham's bosom?
Right,
All right, so he was set free to be in the presence of Jesus from that moment on.
right,
So they enjoyed paradise, and now they're in the Lord's presence.
yeah,
And that's the ones that were seen walking around.
yeah. And that kind of gets me back to that glorified body. Was they? I mean, because they were recognizable but how many people really knew them because they could have been 1,000 years old or older at that time when Jesus was resurrected. They could have been very old. They could have not been anybody on earth that knew who they was.
Some of them.
Yeah,
Some of them could have been a week old or a
Right.
day old.
right.
Could have been John the Baptist.
Yeah,
Does it say something about Jesus being the first fruits of the resurrection?
That was his birthday.
Well, it's like, people, if they die at 90 or die at 40, some people think they're gonna be that age in heaven, and other people, everybody's gonna be pretty much the same age, but then, our recognizable body is not really there then. I guess, I don't know.
The way I understand it, you're going to be in a perfect body.
Yeah,
Um,
but it'll say you'll be recognized, you'll be known by those.
You'll be known as ye are
you.
known. Yeah, you'll be known as ye are known is the way that it's phrased.
but we won't have this little squishy thing in our head back then either. This is all we can think with now. We'll have, we could know somebody by their spiritual body. You know what I mean? It could be that clear because we won't be thinking with this earthly body, with this earthly brain and everything else. We'll have a glorified body, glorified everything, and we'll have the answers to all this stuff we're wondering about. So we may see, I could see your spiritual body and know who you are. Because we're thinking with this head what we think it's going to be like, but it could be, we could recognize everyone just because, like as good as you would, like looking through a phone book, you'd know everyone, if we're not using this little pea brain.
Well, I guess, it's strange and never ending,
Yeah,
because everything here has an ending.
everything.
So it's hard for me to grasp that it's never, ever, ever, it's always
Yeah.
gonna be the same.
Yeah, I studied this past week about exactly what you're talking about, and the only thing on earth that is never ending is the earth, because it does winter, spring, summer, fall every year, same thing every year, and then we try to add stuff to it, and nothing lasts. Nothing lasts. There ain't hardly any buildings we build. There's not hardly anything that we add to it that lasts. Everything crumbles, or like I was thinking about that with my house. Whoever built my house wanted it this way. Then the next person that moved in wanted something different, so they tore that out and put something different in. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm tearing something out and putting something else in. So nothing ever lasts. It's just, it changes with every generation. So. And you can see it from from our grandparents to us, even how much things have changed, you know.
Well, we're in the throwaway disposable. And people used to build houses to last 100
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And they built furniture. Now, when we buy it, we know it's gonna tear up in 5 years, it's
Yeah.
gonna fall apart.
Yep.
But, when they made stuff, I've got a 1850s wardrobe that was made, and it was my great-grandfather's, and it's about that thick, but it, you know, it was handmade, and it's been handed down. I've had it for 50 years, and before that, my great aunt had it, and
Yeah.
before that, you know, so it's still sturdy. I just had it moved. My
Yeah.
nephew came and moved it, and it is heavy. He said, Aunt Sharon, I said, it hadn't been moved in 36 years, Mike. I mean, it's, because when we moved into this house, Jean said, put it where you want it. I'm not moving it again. I mean, it is heavy, but it's handmade.
Yeah.
But now, this furniture that you get is plywood.
Presswood.
I mean, your sofas and your dining room chairs, they're put together by glue, and they fall apart.
We're going down to verse 15. 15 says, for this, and we've done talked about this, but it's good. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. And it says those, in the text here, it says those who remain alive until Christ's return will have no advantage over those who have died. Those who have gone to heaven will by no means miss out on the blessings of Christ's return. So that, he's clearing up all that. But now let's go on to verse 16. It says, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. And pretty much going to read a lot of this text here, because I can't say it much better than this. You're going to follow along in your book. But it says, Christ will leave heaven where he has been since his ascension, and to return to the sky in fulfillment of his promise to come again for believers. You remember in his ascension, he said, you'll see me coming in the same way. It says, his descent to the sky above the earth will be accompanied by 3 sounds. A great shout or cry will summon believers who have died, as if awakening them from sleep. The cry will be a shout of command, like that of a general calling his troops to battle. It says, the voice of an archangel and the blast of the trumpet of God will also sound. In the Old Testament, the sound of a trumpet often signified the Lord's presence, or the coming day of the Lord, which begins with the return of Christ for his church. These sounds may occur separately or all at once to produce great noise. Either way, Christ's return will be unmistakable to believers. So, you don't have to build your house facing east, because you're going to know it. I know a lot of people talk about building their houses facing the east, or their church facing the east, or whatever. That's not necessary. You're going to know when he comes. There's not going to be any doubt when it happens. And also it says, after Christ returned to the sky, the dead in Christ will rise. Dead in Christ refers to the bodies of church-aged believers who have died. All of them will have been living in heaven since the time of their death. Paul specifically corrected the Thessalonians' misunderstanding that their dead loved ones were at some sort of disadvantage compared to living believers. Church-aged believers who have died will return from heaven with Christ and receive their glorified permanent bodies immediately before the rapture of living believers. Their new bodies will be recognizable and permanently perfect. Permanently perfect. And all of this is going to happen that quick. So that's how amazing. Because everything, you think that's a lot going on right there. You're going to, the saints who are already gone with Christ will come back, receive their glorified bodies, and then those who are alive and remain will be caught up in the air in the twinkling of an eye, or in a moment. and so you'll forever be with the Lord. So all that's going to happen really fast. We can't comprehend that. Because to me that sounds like a process, but it's really not. If God can form the earth in a day, then the process is not that big of a deal to Him. But it seems like a big process in our heads to just think about all those different things happening at the same time. And it's verse 17, I think I just said it, says, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds